She broke every barrier in fashion, became the first Black supermodel to achieve true global icon status, and changed the industry forever.
Proud to be a Black woman. I'm proud to be British. I'm proud of the job that I do.
But Naomi Campbell's legacy is as complicated as it is revolutionary.
And I remember when they said to me in a cover I wanted a cover of French Vogue, because I saw these other girls like Linda and Christy saying, "Can I have a cover?" And they'd be like, "No problem."
For every groundbreaking magazine cover, there was an assault charge. For every barrier she shattered, there was a phone she threw. The world saw her as angry, difficult, violent, a diva who couldn't control her temper. But what if that anger was justified? What if the legendary temper was the result of fighting battles that no one else had to face? What if Naomi Campbell's violence was born from an industry that was violent to her first?
And I met her in London here, and we were shooting Warehouse. Remember Warehouse?
Yes.
For 5 decades, she's been both icon and cautionary tale, revolutionary and defendant, barrier breaker, and tabloid target. The woman who forced fashion to acknowledge Black beauty also forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about what it costs to be first. So what really drives Naomi Campbell? How did a girl from South London become fashion royalty despite an industry that didn't want her? And how did she survive and reinvent herself after nearly destroying everything she'd built? The answer is more complex, more painful, and more powerful than any headline ever captured. Origins and discovery. South London, 1970. Naomi Elaine Campbell was born into a world that would spend decades telling her she didn't belong. Her mother, Valerie Morris, was a Jamaican-born dancer who raised Naomi alone after her father abandoned them before she was born. Money was tight, opportunities were limited, and racism was the invisible wall that blocked almost every path forward. Valerie worked constantly, performing in dance troupes and taking whatever gigs she could find to support her daughter. Young Naomi often accompanied her mother to rehearsals and performances, absorbing the discipline and artistry of professional dance from the earliest age. It was a childhood defined by hard work, instability, and the constant awareness that they were different. Naomi showed early talent for performing, and Valerie scraped together money to enroll her in the prestigious Italia Conti Academy of Theater Arts at age 10. This wasn't a vanity project or a stage mother's ambition. It was an investment in skills that might provide her daughter with opportunities that South London rarely offered to Black girls. At Italia Conti, Naomi studied ballet, modern dance, and acting. She was talented, disciplined, and driven in ways that impressed her teachers. But even in the performing arts, a supposedly progressive field, she encountered the subtle and not so subtle racism that would define much of her early life. Fewer opportunities, lower expectations, the constant message that girls who looked like her had limited futures. The discovery that would change everything happened almost by accident. At 15, Naomi was window shopping in Covent Garden when Beth Bolt, a scout for the Synchro model agency, spotted her. It wasn't just Naomi's beauty that caught Bolt's attention. It was the way she carried herself, the natural grace that came from years of dance training. But getting signed was just the beginning. The British fashion industry in the mid-1980s had very specific ideas about beauty, and those ideas rarely included Black faces. Agencies would literally tell Naomi they couldn't book her because clients weren't ready for Black models. The message was clear: you're beautiful, but you're the wrong kind of beautiful. Naomi's first significant break came in 1986, when she appeared on the cover of British LA at just 15 years old. It was a moment of validation, proof that her face could sell magazines. But it was also a reminder of how rare such opportunities were for Black models. This was news precisely because it was so unusual. In 1988, Naomi became the first Black model to appear on the cover of French Vogue in its 50-year history. Read that again. 50 years. Half a century of one of the world's most influential fashion magazines, and not a single Black face had been deemed worthy of the cover until Naomi forced them to change. That cover wasn't just a personal achievement. It was a declaration of war against an industry that had spent decades excluding women who looked like her. Supermodel dominance and racial barriers. By 1990, Naomi Campbell had achieved something unprecedented. She wasn't just a successful Black model, she was one of the industry's biggest stars, period. Alongside Linda Evangelista and Christy Turlington, she formed the Trinity, the three supermodels who could command unprecedented fees and literally refused to get out of bed for less than $10,000 a day. But even at the peak of her success, Naomi was fighting battles her white counterparts never faced. She'd watch Linda and Christy book campaign after campaign while she was passed over with vague excuses about target demographics and brand fit. The message was always the same. You're good enough to walk our runways, but not good enough to represent our brand. Gianni Versace became her greatest champion and closest friend in the industry. He didn't just book Naomi. He built campaigns around her, made her his muse, and publicly declared that anyone who wouldn't use black models was a racist. Their relationship was transformative. Here was one of fashion's most powerful figures, using his influence to force change. The runway was where Naomi truly dominated. Her walk became legendary, powerful, sensual, commanding attention in ways that transcended race or any other category. When Naomi closed a show, it was an event. Designers would specifically request her for the finale because they knew she could deliver a moment that audiences would never forget. But the magazine covers told a different story. Throughout the early 90s, Naomi watched white models with less experience and fewer bookings land prestigious Vogue covers while she was passed over. When she did get covers, they were often for ethnic editions or special issues, as if her beauty couldn't represent universal standards. In 1997, Naomi did something radical. She spoke publicly about racism in fashion. In interviews, she called out the industry's double standards, naming publications that refused to put black models on covers and brands that wouldn't hire black faces for campaigns. This wasn't done in the 90s. Models were supposed to be grateful for opportunities, not critical of the system. The backlash was swift. Industry insiders called her ungrateful and difficult. Some designers stopped booking her, and magazines became even more reluctant to feature her. Speaking truth to power came with professional consequences that her white peers never had to consider. But something else was happening alongside her professional battles. The anger that fueled her fight against racism was spilling over into other areas of her life. The first assault allegations emerged in the late 90s. Assistants claiming Naomi had physically attacked them, thrown phones, created hostile work environments. The 1998 phone-throwing incident became infamous. Naomi allegedly struck her assistant, Georgina Galanis, with a telephone during a dispute. The case went to court, and suddenly the supermodel who'd broken barriers was making headlines for violence instead of fashion. The pattern repeated itself with disturbing regularity. Another assistant, another alleged assault, another court date. Each incident reinforced a narrative. Naomi Campbell was out of control, a diva whose success had gone to her head, a violent woman who couldn't handle the pressures of fame. This doesn't excuse the violence. Assault is never acceptable regardless of context. But it does complicate the story. Naomi wasn't just a diva with a temper, she was a woman carrying the weight of being first, of fighting battles constantly, of never being allowed to just be a model without also being a symbol and a target. The fashion world wanted Naomi to be grateful for being allowed into their exclusive club. Instead, she demanded they change the club's rules to accommodate her and the black models who would follow. That defiance came with a price that would nearly destroy everything she'd built: scandal, redemption, and reinvention. The early 2000s brought Naomi's personal struggles into devastating focus. The assault charges weren't isolated incidents anymore. They were a pattern that courts could no longer ignore. In 2000, she pleaded guilty to assaulting her assistant, Georgina Galanis, and received community service. In 2007, another guilty plea for throwing a jewel-encrusted phone at her housekeeper. In 2008, yet another assault at London's Heathrow Airport. Each incident chipped away at her professional standing. Major fashion houses became hesitant to associate with her. Endorsement deals evaporated. Insurance companies refused to cover productions she was involved in, making her essentially unhireable for certain projects. The woman who'd broken barriers was now being locked out of the industry she'd helped transform. Court-ordered anger management became a recurring theme. Judges mandated therapy, community service, public apologies. Naomi appeared in court wearing designer clothes that cost more than most people's yearly salary, creating optics that made sympathy difficult. The narrative became simple. Spoiled supermodel can't control her temper. But behind the headlines, Naomi was finally confronting demons she'd been battling for decades. She acknowledged struggles with addiction, cocaine, alcohol, the substances that had fueled the party lifestyle of 90s supermodels. The anger management wasn't just about controlling her temper, it was about addressing the trauma, pain, and pressure that had accumulated over years of being the first. Her personal life offered little stability. High-profile relationships with Mike Tyson, Robert De Niro, Russian billionaires, and countless others played out in tabloids that were more interested in scandal than substance. Each relationship seemed to follow a similar pattern. Intense passion followed by explosive endings, with Naomi's temper often cited as a contributing factor. The friendship with Kate Moss, another supermodel battling her own demons, became both support system and enabler. Together, they were fixtures of London's party scene, two women whose brilliance in their craft was often overshadowed by their personal chaos. They understood each other's struggles in ways that outsiders couldn't, but they also reinforced each other's destructive patterns. The turning point came gradually rather than dramatically. Naomi began channeling her energy into philanthropy, launching Fashion for Relief in 2005 to raise money for disaster victims and humanitarian causes. The runway shows featured top models donating their time, with proceeds going to charity. It was Naomi using her power and connections for something beyond herself. Her focus on Africa became particularly meaningful. As a Black supermodel who'd fought for representation, Naomi turned her attention to showcasing African fashion and supporting the continent's emerging designers. She became a vocal advocate for economic development through fashion, using her platform to bring attention to talent that Western media typically ignored. In 2021, at age 50, Naomi announced she'd become a mother via surrogate. The news shocked the fashion world. Here was a woman who'd seemed permanently focused on career and causes, suddenly embracing motherhood at an age when most models are considered past their prime. The baby represented a new chapter, a softening of the edges that had made her both powerful and destructive. Today's Naomi is different from the volatile supermodel of the 2000s. She's more measured in her public statements, more strategic in choosing her battles, more focused on legacy than headlines. But the fire that made her revolutionary hasn't disappeared, it's simply been redirected toward causes that matter. So what really drives Naomi Campbell? The need to prove over and over again that she belonged in spaces designed to exclude her. The violence, the anger, the legendary temper. These weren't just personality flaws. They were the result of decades spent fighting a system that told her she was beautiful enough to use but not valuable enough to celebrate equally. Every barrier she broke came with invisible scars that accumulated until they exploded in ways that nearly destroyed her. At 54, she's still working, still relevant, still powerful. She's become what she always fought to be: impossible to ignore, impossible to diminish, impossible to erase. The girl from South London who wasn't supposed to belong anywhere now belongs everywhere. Naomi Campbell didn't just break barriers, she forced fashion to acknowledge that the barriers were wrong in the first place. And that revolution, messy and complicated as it was, changed everything. If you enjoyed this complex portrait of Naomi Campbell's revolutionary career, hit that subscribe button for more stories about the icons who changed their industries forever, flaws and all. I'll see you in the next one.